Good morning, everybody. I'm really delighted to see everybody here this morning. So good morning, but also certainly good afternoon, good evening for those who are on our online streaming as well, because we're streaming this event at the same time. My name's Amanda Harding. It's my real privilege to be able to moderate today's event, both this morning and this afternoon. Before I get going into what we're going to be doing for the day and to welcome our first round of guests who are here at the table already, I would like to hand over for a more formal opening to Mathilda Danser as the Director of the Netherlands Food Partnership. Over to you.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everybody here in the room, and good afternoon, good evening, and good morning also, all the audience that connects to this important event today online. I'm very happy to welcome you all here. You think Netherlands Food Partnership? Yes, we are this party, a convening platform that tries to be on the background, supporting important initiatives like the collaboration between the Dutch government and an important institute like CGIAR on this important agenda that we will discuss today. So I would like to really welcome you to an open discussion. Please participate also in the different things that will happen. And we are very excited that we came to an end of a very important preparatory process for the future collaboration the next years, but also that we will be able to discuss today more in detail the agenda on private sector collaboration in research agendas, and how can we engage more the private sector in food system transformations that we all envision to be able to contribute to a more sustainable food system in low and middle income countries. Thank you so much. Thank you also so much to my team that has worked very hard to make this possible. And I give the word back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mathilda. So for me, just to sort of pick up on that, I guess the first thing to do is just to remind everybody what the theme of today's event is. We've called this Open for Business, Strengthening CGIAR Private Sector Engagement for Innovation and the Scaling. So just a reminder of that. A reminder that we are here on behalf of, as Mathilda said, the Netherlands Food Partnership, but also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality, and the CGIAR. So important that, we welcome everybody in that context. You're about 50 people, I'm looking around the room, here in the room with us. There's 180 people registered online who have joined us as well today. What we're going to be doing this morning, well, the first thing we'll be doing this morning is signing this Memorandum of Understanding, as you know, but then we're going to move on from there straight away into a keynote speech with some time for questions and answers with Juan Lucas Restrepo, sitting right here, Global Director for Partnership and Advocacy at the CGIAR. We'll have a case report presentation by Francesco Cecchi. Again, I'm just remembering, please, apologies if I pronounce everybody's names terribly during the day today. It's a real challenge. As I've been trying to say, I have a sort of French-English mouth. I definitely do not have an Italian, Dutch, Kenyan, Rwandan or anything else mouth. So it's a bit of a challenge. But keep on going. We'll be doing some showcasing as one of the experiences with the private sector, between the private sector and the CGIAR. We'll be launching this special report, and I hope everybody has a special report here. Either you're sitting on it or you are actually looking at it online, for those who are online right now. This afternoon is really an afternoon of the deeper dive, and we'll be doing the afternoon moving from the hybrid into the purely virtual space. We'll be going a deeper dive into some of the case studies, some of the major questions that come up in the report, and then we'll try and pull that together with some recommendations that we hope will really nourish the programming of the CGIAR as it moves forward from here. I think that's probably it to get us going this morning, which means that I can then I'm looking at my guides here. I'm going to come and sit down with you lot over here. So this is why I have to go into more formal, I think we go into protocol, formal mode here, but maybe not so much. Thank you, Kitty. She laughs at that. That's really helpful because I'm not very good at that, as you all know. But I will welcome you all because I think that's just the most important thing. Again, from left to right, no other order than that. Elwyn Granger-Jones, who's the Managing Director of Institutional Strategy and Systems at the CGIAR. Big welcome to you, Elwyn. Kitty van der Heijden, again, terrible probably pronunciation of your name, Director General of International Cooperation at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Good to see you, Kitty. Anne-Maria Benz, Director General of Agro, Ministry of Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality. And I mentioned earlier how impressed I am personally that within the ministry you actually talk specifically about food quality and you actually pull that together. And that's, I'm sure, quite exceptional in Europe today as well. We've got a few minutes to have some conversation, and then we'll move straight into the MOU. You have pens in front of you to sign it. It's, yeah, exactly, I love that. The signing hand is ready. We'll do a little bit of a photo op. This is an important moment. Again, this is an important moment of coming together. It's also a real celebration, and what better place to do it than in this beautiful theatre and the privilege of actually getting us, some of us physically together, but also in that greater virtual space as well. So we are actually a show that is happening today, and I think it's worthwhile to remember that, and we're in the theatre to be able to do that. But let's start with you, Elwyn. As I said, there's a sort of looking back, looking forward question for you. When you reflect back on this partnership between the Netherlands and the CGIAR, this strategic partnership that started in 2015, what have been its main strengths in that partnership?
Thanks, and look, thanks for the invitation. It's just so nice to be here with such close colleagues. I would say that the way I'd characterize the partnership we have is it's really a partnership for change, right? We are partners in a huge changes that are going on around us and within all our own organizations. So that to me is the context. So if I look back at when, I think I was here 5 years ago for when we did this first MOU, how different the world seemed then. And we were being urged, quite rightly, by these key leading Dutch partners, so much intelligence, so much innovation happening in the private sector and in the universities and the science sector here, urging us to think more about systems and food systems, when that term was just, it was known, but it was not at the forefront of the way most of us were framing what we were doing. Also urging us to think about the huge, well, let's be honest, damage that the food system was doing to human health and the environment and the climate, and the way that was feeding back into what was happening within food systems, and to really engage on that as a matter of urgency. And I think that really helped shape our thinking. The way we had an experts program with Dutch science, the way we developed some really innovative seed system approaches and thinking and working with the private sector. And also the strong encouragement that we have a much more partnership-based model for what we do, which was really an open door in CGIAR, because that's the whole way we work, but we need to do it better. So I look back, with huge, I think, a really positive sense of how this partnership in change has helped us. And I guess the foundation of that is institutions only remain relevant if they change at least at the speed of the way the world is changing around them, and actually it should be faster. And what we're seeing is just the urgency, the emergency with which particularly climate change is unfolding, and the impact of that by our food systems on our food systems mean, we're in a completely different context than we would be without bringing that into our thinking. And so what we've done in that period is entirely reframe the way we organize CGIAR, entirely reframe the way we're working on partnerships, and Juan Lucas will say something about that, a very different model around how we engage as one to make it easier for our partners. So looking forward, what do we need looking forward? Second part of the question. I think it's about implementation now, and it's about implementation with urgency. We've got a new MOU, which is wonderful, continuation of this really successful senior expert program, build on the recommendations of this really well-written report. I encourage you all to read that. It's super clear in the way it unpacks and unpicks such a complex set of issues around working with the private sector, and also how we unfold and develop our work around capacity sharing. But more broadly, Netherlands continuing its support for the kind of change that's uncomfortable for any organization to actually put practice to these words around integration and systems thinking, which is not easy for any institution to engage, where we actually developed around silos in the last century, and we need to work beyond that and across that. So I think the funding is provided in a very special way by the Netherlands. It's a 6-year commitment. They stand out amongst funders as really an exceptional way of working. It's a funding partnership, but it's also a thought partnership, continuing to keep the pressure on us to change and complete our change, and to see through this excellent memorandum. So I think it'll be another great 5 years looking forward. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Elwyn. I mean, it's a great segue into the sort of the question over to Kitty, which is again what you think and what you see as that collaborative advantage. And I love this notion of a collaborative as opposed to a comparative advantage in a partnership. What's changed since 2015? And does this mean that we're actually going to be able to, through this partnership, be better positioned to hit those SDG targets that we've set for tomorrow, basically?
Look, maybe a bit of history. I was just talking to Elwyn that I managed the department that sits on the pot of money for climate, energy, environment, and water in 2009, right? So I've been funding CGIAR in the past. And, you know, we're Dutch and we're in the theater, so I'm allowed to be honest to the point of being rude, right? This is what we're here for. And I loved CGIAR because they have really good quality research. But I had no idea what was happening on the ground. Is it trickling down? So that was frustration number one. And frustration number two, basically that we had, you know, an ecosystem of excellent research, and it wasn't connected to what CGIAR was doing. And so, of course, after I left, they got it all right. I left in 2014 and hopefully laid some of the seeds that then came to full fruition in 2015. Before that time, we were just seeing CGIAR as a partner in the sense that we were funding them. We'd just give a pot of money and they would do excellent things with that. And they would still do. But we wanted something more. And that more was particularly bringing in all that excellent research that we have in the Netherlands. And so beyond giving resources, we also signed a bilateral agreement where we have joint collaborative research. We second scientists to the CGIAR programs. We do joint research, for example, on seed systems, on climate adaptation. So we're really trying to bring things together for better impact on the ground. And so the reform process that Elwyn was describing started, I would say, with transformations in thinking, right? That we cannot do this from a sector perspective or a commodity perspective, that we really need integrated system thinking. In my time, when I was managing this portfolio, system thinking was still very far away. It just didn't really exist when we started on thinking about landscape approaches that bring together soils, water, climate impacts, seeds. That was a novelty. Now it's ingrained in the system, and CGIAR has changed with it. So bringing one CGIAR together in thinking from systems, now we're in the process of setting up that institutional setting to help deliver that thinking. And I think the next step is really bringing it down to the country level and making sure that impact is achieved for the poorest people, because that's where the rubber meets the road. What I see is 3 major challenges everywhere in Africa where we work. It is the triple C of climate change, the impact of COVID-19, and enhanced conflict. Look at the Sahel, look at Burkina Faso, Mali, look at what's happening in Chad, look at the Horn, look at Ethiopia, Sudan, Somalia, you name it. Right, so food insecurity is actually on the rise. We are way off where we need to be. And so what we need to do, and that's where CGIAR, I would say, is an absolutely crucial delivery mechanism, is not just more ambition in terms of systems thinking, but more action and linking that to national food system pathways. And then adaptation to climate change. And Elwyn rightly called this the climate emergency, and that is what it is. The impact is being felt here and now in livelihoods. And it is upon us and the best science that we can bring, and on us to deliver that on the ground with the private sector, which in the end will be the vehicle that makes this a sustainable effort. So I see many changes in the way we work, in the way we think, and that hopefully sets us up for success. And you know, we have 8 years to keep the world of a degree and a half within reach. I'm absolutely scared about that. And to bring a food secure future. So we better get going.
Kitty, thank you so much. And again, it's sort of your sort of call to action, and I'm actually hearing a call to action from both of you. I'm sure, Marie, you'll be taking us further into that call to action. We heard from Kitty about the collaboration with the private sector. You know, within, you know, as DG of Agro, can you just tell us a little bit more why this private sector engagement is so important in trying to achieve those SDGs, in trying to, you know, keep under 1.5, and to see, you know, does that mean that the CGIAR has a role to play in that as well?
Yeah, thank you, Amanda, for this question. I think that mobilizing the capacities of the private sector is essential to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And especially, like Kitty mentioned, in the global agri-food system. So today we are facing, like Kitty already mentioned, some of the world's biggest challenges. So we need to provide a growing population with enough affordable and nutritious food. We have to deal with the impact of climate change and addressing other environmental challenges. And now more than ever, we realize how vulnerable our food system is and the worldwide dependencies because of the consequences of COVID-19, but also the invasion of Ukraine. So to tackle these problems, we must work together with all kinds of companies, from smallholder and family farmers to mid-sized and big companies, as well as financial institutions. So working together with the private sector is of great value, and they can offer technologies, knowledge, working together with research, and I think if we want to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, we need more ideas, more innovation, and more strategic partners. And the private sector must be one of the strategic partners.
Thanks. I mean, I'm just going to sort of do a last sort of round through. So I'm sorry if this comes a little bit from left field for the three of you, but we have a few minutes, and I just thought it'd just be interesting to hear. So what I'm hearing a lot from all of you is a question of, you know, urgency. You know, we can't wait. The question of, you know, the call to action behind that. We're now going into a collaborative partnership mode, which is all about implementation. It's not about sort of nice sort of aspirational thoughts anymore. We don't have, you know, we can't do that. We know what we need to do. Let's get on and do it. I guess my question to all three of you is, so what will be the one thing that could actually really collaboratively propel us forward? Because, you know, I was also sitting here, well, I was standing probably in a slightly different room in 2015 when the first MOU was signed. So we're 7 years on. My challenge to you is, you know, we can't actually be back here in 5 or 7 years saying, well, we still need to do this. So what would be the one major thing that would actually propel us together forward? Elwyn, can I put you on the spot for that? Because, I'll do that to you.
That's okay. No, if there's one thing that will propel us forward, I think it's putting action to what we've said, and it's just getting on with it now with a much greater sense of urgency. It's amazing. It's this human capability to just look in the near term and focus on some of the details in the near term without, looking up, right? And I think we're at this moment now in history where the transformation that's needed in food systems, we all need to change the way we work. And that's what we've been hearing from our Dutch partners for some years, and that's what we've now trying to do in CGIAR. So, we urgently need to get our new portfolio up and running. Martin Kropf is in the audience somewhere and is working with us to help us lead the science to do that. We urgently need to transform our institutions to be able to deliver that. And we urgently need to change all the policies and the food system itself. And I think that's, that to me is the thing. And there are many details within that we could speak about, but it's kind of recognizing that notion of an emergency in our food system and quite how fragile it is and quite how every year there is some great shock, whether it's COVID, whether it's now what's happening in Ukraine. There'll be some climate-related emergencies, inevitably, as we're seeing in various food systems. And, our ability to change institutions and the science and the innovation within that needs to just rapidly step up. We're not going fast enough, frankly, on much of this.
Thanks, Alan. Ryan, I'm going to switch the order a bit. Can I turn to you for your one thing to propel us forward and then end with Kitty?
Yes, of course. What I think is, and maybe that sounds a little bit small, but I think it's important to show the good examples and to have impact to put really in practice the approaches we have. And I think in the Netherlands we have a lot of experience with this. So we have an innovation-driven policy in the Netherlands, in which we work together with companies, knowledge institutions, and civil society. And we call this approach the Dutch diamond. And one very nice and good example is one of the seed sector projects in Vietnam, and in which we work together with the CGIAR research. And our goal was to figure out how something as simple as seed can provide nutrition and financial security. And the goal is to have a real balance between health, nutrition, affordability and accessibility. And I think bringing parties together in a chain, people realize and see the whole pictures. So where farmers most farmers were working from seed to crop, and nutritionists were working from crop to food. By bringing those together, farmers were realizing that the seed diversity is very important, and nutritionists realized that you can't grow crop everywhere because of agricultural constraints. So by bringing those worlds together, you can really meet the local needs. And I think also we have the urgency and the big issues and challenges, but it's also about finding the solutions and creativity to bringing those worlds together in the collaboration with the private partners, local communities and research.
Thanks so much. Kitty, over to you.
If there was only one silver bullet, God, I would love it. I doubt. So I'm gonna not do what you say, and I'm gonna use my my position here on the podium with some slight bit of civil disobedience. So, to me, it's moving from PPP to Ppps. Okay, so what do we not do? It's not about pilots. It is not about publications, and it is not about PR. You can do that in a theater. This is about system thinking. I mean, the unintended consequences of a commodity push on climate, on water, on soils. So we have to put that system thinking first. Second S, this is about the solid partnership between science and policy. Really, this is about science for impact. It's about women, it's about youth, it's about really making sure that we deliver on the ground. This is not some kind of abstract thing you were looking at. This is about delivering on the ground for real people that matter and that we need to protect against climate change. And then the third S for me really is around scaling. We've done so many lovely things, but we now need to think big. And so we need to think about innovation. We need to think about how the digital opportunities can be marketed for much faster impact. And we need new business models. And so that's where, literally this is about, are we open for business? Because that's the way we deliver on the ground, not through science, but making sure that the business understands new business models and delivers it for people in need. So my big call really is move away from P, go to SS, and then, we have 8 years. That's done by tomorrow. So scaling and emergency, go for it.
I'm going to thank all three of you right now. I'm going to ask you to get your pens to the ready, bring on the MOUs, maybe a round of applause. Do we get a round of applause? I think a round of applause, thank you. I love the round of applause. Yes, sir. Ask you to sign. You're going to have to sign 3 times, I assume.
What for you it is. Some kind of an Easter egg. Do we sign on all pages or only towards the end? Just for the legal experts on this?
Initial each paragraph.
Usually you initial each page, so just making sure that I do it right. Any advice?
Sign.
Just sign.
Okay.
Shut up. All right.
And then hand over to, let's go, I'm going to organise this.
Yeah.
Go round in the, keep going round in this direction, and then this direction,
okay.
otherwise
Okay.
this is a first for me. Oh, such fun.
It is, isn't it?
I'll tell you, this is fun. Yep. I'll take that one. Okay.
Yeah.
Last time.
Okay. 3 copies.
And now I'm going to ask you to come up to the screen so we can take a photo of all 3 of you.
Great.
There it is. I think I'm going to take that way.
Yeah. Thank you.
Are you being told that you need to be holding these?
Okay.
Sorry, I follow instructions.
Thank you.
Let me do a.
Oh yes, tie up that nice bow.
Got to look nice in a nice bow. There we go. You definitely don't want to see my computer.
Yes.
So if we shake hands, you can't hold because you're going to have to shake her hands and mine.
Do a double handshake.
Thank you very much. Do you want to? There's a little step, or you can jump down.
Yeah.
Get your stuff. I could get mine.
Okay, this important paper.
Oh, I'll take those. You're not walking away with Elwyn? Thank you. Right. Okay, so I guess that was the important work of the day. But But we're going to move sort of swiftly on, as we knew that we were going to be running a little bit over time. But I would at this point, to help us start making a little bit more sense, getting behind the intention of partnership, collaboration, and what this looks like. And I'd like to pick up on Kitty's triple S over triple P as the day goes on. I really would like to welcome, come up here, Juan Lucas Restrepo, Global Director for Partnership and Advocacy. He's now just going to give us that first zoom into actually what we really are talking about when we talk about partnership and the private sector. You have about 10 minutes. We do have time. We've laid aside some time for Q&A. Those of you who are online, please use the chat to be able to put your questions in, and we hope that we'll be able to sort of bring some of them into the room here. Those of you in the room, think about those questions, and we've got a roaming mic that we can take it to you. After Juan Lucas gets his 10 minutes, I will step aside and give you the 10 minutes. You've just got to...
Next.
I think you can manage
There
that.
you go. Okay, great. Thank you, Amanda. Good to see you again. We are seeing each other like every week. Great to be here today, live in person. Just feeling again the pleasure of being in front of a live audience and not only seeing the world through a screen. I have 10 minutes to frame part of the discussion today and present to you what's the current thinking related to private sector engagement in CGIAR, and of course, as we will see through the day, drawing and aligning significantly on this great paper, of which I saw a draft about 8-9 months ago, already signaling, giving very clear signals on way forward, and seeing the final product and reading it again is really refreshing in terms of, as you will see, our system aligning into really different and novel ways to innovate through private sector collaboration. So you heard some of this from Elwin, and I'm pretty sure you are up to date as much as that can happen on the reform, on what's happening in terms of CGIAR transformation. And CGIAR change is about bringing together in an effective way the capacities of a number of international organizations that were brothers and sisters, that we were kind of good friends, into a much tighter, closer direction of travel. And this is done mainly by bringing the science together. And we're doing this through the setting up of 3 research areas that you can see that start at the micro, the more traditional historical work of the system on breeding, on a number of staple crops, etc. But that now is also very clearly connecting at the landscape level and with integrated systems approaches, bringing different bits and pieces of these systems together in a more inter and transdisciplinary way. And it's about the bigger picture of systems transformation and how the science policy interface and our linkage with climate change, with nutrition, etc., it takes place. So it's these 3 areas together with a mandate to, as we heard from Elwin, transform food, land, and water systems in a climate crisis, and climate cuts across basically all of our efforts. But this is just part of the story, and what we see is that it's not only the science, it's centered around the science, but we need to generate an enabling environment for impact, where we learn from great history, but really understand that in order to meet societal challenges, environmental degradation, all of this big pressure we're facing, we need to change our thinking and how we do business. So the reform is also thinking about we connect to the ground. We ground wire our work into regions and countries, and how we align all of our efforts around a number of outcomes that are SDG related and of course deal with food security, livelihoods, inclusion, biodiversity, etc. And then we also have this great opportunity to put extra pressure on the system, given there is not better chance than a change process to change how we go about business, to become more innovative, to challenge our old way of doing things into a new business as usual. And as you will see in this chart here, we have this, and given we are in the Netherlands, you can relate to this. It's like it's a hockey stick that has partners across all levels of the strategy. So we basically understand that 3,500 scientists organization that works across more than 100 countries needs to leverage on its current network of partners. We are bringing great relationships from the past, but we also understand that we need to position ourselves and accommodate ourselves in an ecosystem that has evolved in a way so that we are complementary to other institutions, parts of that ecosystem, and that we can use our capacities to leverage our outcomes through that ecosystem. So basically, we are saying, and this comes from the SRG recommendations, that partnerships need to be the bedrock of our 2030 research and innovation strategy. And in order to do this, we launched a few days ago, and this is very exciting, given I was championing this effort with collaboration across the system, framework for partnerships and advocacy for the system. And this framework is a prototype. No engagement framework is right. It's something that needs to evolve, where we need to test and change our prototypes and keep evolving. But we have, for the whole system, one set of guiding principles, support systems, and a clear ambition in terms of value proposition on how to drive things forward in order to partner up as a system. And of course, private sector engagement is central to that. So it's not only the public sector, the academia, civil society, but also the private sector. And as you see from some of these figures, the private sector is currently on the driver's seat in terms of investment and in terms of shaping the landscape and what's happening on the ground. So we cannot ignore that trend, and we need to understand how we better connect and work with the private sector. So what we have been doing, and this has been already a decision from our governance, we're setting this unit following a lot of these recommendations called Private Partnerships for Impact, that will basically organize the system in a distributed manner. So we will support every individual scientist as well as develop a specific support and service systems around these three main areas. The first one is related to culture, and it's a capacity sharing, how we learn from the private sector and how we grow in terms of our partnerships, our own capacity, as well as the capacity of our partners. So it's more about a culture of entrepreneurship in research and development where there's still a big gap. It's about incremental innovation. There's great things we do together, and with the Netherlands, we saw, for example, success stories in seed systems, working with small companies, etc., in digital entrepreneurship that we need to learn from, systematize, cut, paste, and scale in a significant way, and we need to support that. We need to do better in our IP, licensing in and out, and brokering deals that do not curtail our public goods mandate, but that really allow in our partnerships for companies to access markets, to leverage our knowledge. And of course, it's about markets and understanding the economy of these relationships and how we can position ourselves in a greater manner. And lastly, is this also disruptive side of innovation, is how we as a system learn to work with accelerators, incubators, and be more effective in responding to demand. So it's identifying demand from the ground, from our stakeholders, from farmers, etc., but also demand from the market, from the private sector, and making sure our system is responsive to that. So basically, I want to close with 50 seconds left, Amanda, so we're going to be quite proud, with basically a few additional references to the special report. I like the fact that it's based on specific cases, stories, experiences from the system. So it's drawing from the learnings, our cumulative learnings in the past, and systematizing those into major areas and major questions that we need to address. And of course, it has helped, and you'll hear this from Mark and others during the day, to start shaping something we could not do as individual centers, but we now can do as a system, our new ways of engaging with the private sector at a higher, deeper level, everything to bring more impact at scale for society, for the planet, for biodiversity, for climate, and to make sure we and our funders, our partners, our stakeholders are aligned and happy about our work. So this is it for me as a starter for the day. Thanks a lot.
No. Stay with me.
Down?
No, stay with me. Stay
Sure?
with me. Yeah, absolutely,
Okay.
because we might have some questions for you.
All right.
So we do have a few minutes for questions. Thank you so much, Juanicas, for making sure that we do have some questions. I'm looking here on my screen here. I see that we've got a few questions that have come through on the chat. A show of hands here in the room. Anybody in the room that actually has a question they'd like to put to Juanicas? I guess this is a moment for questions. It's always questions, comments that come at the same time. Okay, while you guys here in the room are thinking, those online have also been thinking about putting their questions in. I'm going to start with the first question.
It's a great one.
Isn't it?
Oh,
it's
yeah.
a great, we see them,
Fantastic.
You don't see them yet. In your opinion, what do you think are the main challenges to use this approach and increase private sector engagement? So this question around the challenges so that we increase that partnering up with the private sector.
I think it's mainly in two fronts. One is behavioral, and it's in terms of the beliefs and the current culture setting in our scientists that over time have seen, not all of them, because there is disruptors as well, private sector as the other sector. We work with the public sector, we're public goods. Public goods does not mean working with the public sector only, but there is that misconception. So we need to change those values, and that means changing, in a second area, the incentive mechanisms for our scientists, so they really understand that private sector is a great pathway to deliver more impact. So it's behavior and incentives mainly, in my view.
So I think this other question, and again, a really key question for one CGIAR, which is about how you're actually going to make sure you engage with the wide range of private sector companies, and particularly those companies who are in the global south.
Okay, we were discussing earlier that most of our scientists, our regional managers, etc., are working on the ground and have been working on the ground for decades now. So we know that landscape very well. We know who's part of the private sector. We see these new business, new entrepreneurs. So we have access to them. And as we develop this framing and this support structure for private sector engagement, the first to benefit from that will be SMEs and, of course, larger entrepreneurs from the global south, because we are already connected to them. We're just not proactive enough to bring them into our work as impact partners, basically.
Yeah, so I'm just going to give the supplementary to what's behind that question. Is my guess is, do you think once CGIAR has been active enough in partnering with those private sector companies in the global south, what's it going to take to shift what has happened in the past to what you could do looking forward?
I think again, we did not have the mandate. We did not think that that was the right way to go about business. We were told, or we inferred, that if we had IP, that IP was only to restrict the private sector from using that IP. There's a lot of mental elements that we need to challenge, but now we have evidence, because we've done, there's good practice in the system as well. So it's about scaling what already, the good things that are already happening. But it's been still on the margins. So it's about mainstreaming and ensuring that private sector engagement is part of the day-to-day, and it's in the mindset of all of our staff and partners, of course.
And response to the sense of urgency that we heard before earlier this morning, I assume.
Well, the good thing is that given we're not starting from scratch, we have a lot of outcomes, we have technologies, we have products, we have a number of elements that can already be driven to impact through private sector. So it should be, the scaling of this would help us in the short term. We don't have to wait for a few years to start seeing additional success stories with the private sector. It's just signaling that it's a positive thing, that it's part of our mandate, and we will start seeing great new engagements with the private sector in the coming days and weeks. I'm pretty convinced about that.
Okay, so it's now, it's not tomorrow. Another question has come up. That's sort of answered one of the questions, but another question has come up. Interesting question. How is the private sector involved in the development of CGIAR research programs? Is it even?
Well, it's not too much. I think there was this chart that I don't know if you saw, called alignment as a core principle for engagement of the system. And alignment is basically making sure that we are responding to effective, real demand, and that we have the capacity to respond. And sometimes we have responded to what our scientists interpret is demand. So now, the first thing is learning to better connect and interpret that demand, so what we set as research is well aligned. Now it's going to make sure that the private sector is part of that unlocking and unveiling demand, that happens on the ground with farmers that are entrepreneurs, with that private sector ecosystem on the ground, but also drawing and understanding demand from the big Agri-Food and the larger companies that can, where we can solve a number of elements that could help them go about business in a more sustainable manner, or leverage from our knowledge as well. So that's it's aligning with demand and making sure better and ensuring the private sector is part of that process of unveiling demand for our efforts.
Thank you very much, Pani, because I think we're going to pause at that point, because we know you're coming back onto the stage later today.
I will be back, yes.
You will be back. We don't let you go too far. I think a round of applause for Lucas. Thank you very much. Thank you. Again, I'm not going to try and wrap that up too much because it's sort of like we're in a sort of flow at this point. And Francesco, he's ready and waiting to come straight up. Come and join me, Francesco. And I mean, rather than wrap up, it's because we're now going to move into a case study that sort of brings, I hope you'll be able to do this in the right way, that what Juan Lucas has been talking about really to life. So I'm really happy, thank you, Francesco Cecchi, I hope that's the right pronunciation. Yes, yeah. Got it. Assistant Professor in the Development Economic Group at Wageningen, so down the street from here, not too far away. You've been looking at a particular piece of research, but sort of research into action, as far as I can see, which is looking at promoting stress-tolerant varieties at scale in Kenya. I'm going to hand over to you. You've got your 8 minutes.
Thank you. So exactly, it's exactly one of those big efforts, perhaps one of the pioneering efforts to try and bring together the private sector from the Global South with researchers within the CGIAR and also Dutch universities. So exactly what we've been hearing today. I'll try to present a little bit the background of our story and what we're trying to do, and then some of the results, lesson learned, challenges we're faced, and perhaps some recommendations. All that, as we heard, in no less than 7 minutes, 30 seconds. So let's get going. The idea behind our project is that we are trying to interlink stress-tolerant seed varieties that are produced by the private sector in Kenya with complementary risk mitigating inputs such as drought insurance, but also advisory services. And we try to do this in an innovative way. And so we are bundling together. We have a program that sort of does a so-called randomized control trial to try and tease out the effects of interlinking these different risk mitigating technologies that are essential to close the yield gap and the productivity gap that we now observe in sub-Saharan Africa, among other regions in the world. So the first innovation is picture-based insurance. The idea here is to actually change the way insurance is done by using smartphones and having farmers take weekly pictures of their fields so that when insurance has to decide whether or not it pays out, it can actually have this historical where it monitors the development of the field from the start of the season and then onwards until maturity. And the advantage of that is that it's very hard for people to cheat a system like this. And it means that we don't have those huge transaction costs on having to go to the field and actually observe the damage that might have incurred, because we have this historical that is assessed by expert agronomists, but we're also teaching machines to do that for us. The other one is picture-based advisory. I think this picture is self-explanatory. Farmers can take pictures, send them to a team of agronomists that then provide feedback without, again, having this huge cost of reaching the last mile. Also, on top of this, we've also been trying to test new models of delivery. That was quite important in our first discussions with the private sector, where we're using the champion farmers that are selling insurance on a normal basis to also book on an online portal the seeds for the farmers, so that seed delivery companies can bring it to the village already knowing who wants what. And also, we are trying to reduce adoption risks by providing trial packs. Probably a lot of you are familiar with the idea of farmer field schools, where there is one showcase field where you can show the capacity of a new variety. We thought probably those conditions in farmer field schools are not identical to the conditions that farmers face. Why don't we give very, very tiny amounts of these new varieties that farmers can farm without risking anything, because it's really a 1 by 1 square meter, but also observe how that actually works for them. And here we can see some results. We saw an increase in the adoption of these stress-tolerant varieties, which was one of our first year objectives to actually observe this. Now, of course, we've also had some challenges that I mentioned here. The private sector was very willing to bridge the last mile, to not stop at the urban agro-dealers. At the same time, what they didn't realize at the start of the project was that farmers were not going to be willing to pay for the seeds until they saw the packet in their hands. Right? So, and the seed companies turn out not to be willing, the private sector companies, to send any shipment without prepayment. So that was one of the challenges that we faced. both parties had a good reason to be skeptical, but then who ends up paying for innovation risks? In our program, that ended up being the program itself, where we actually had to pay up front and face the risk that farmers would shirk on their own commitments, etc. So big question for the audience, who ends up paying for innovation risks? And big point for donors to remember, the innovation risks exist, and we cannot always expect smallholder farmers to bear the entirety of these challenges. What did we really learn over the last 3 years building this collaboration? One thing that really is quite evident when I now sit at the same table after actually 2 years of COVID where we couldn't see each other face to face is that we've been building an enormous social capital, enormous trust between the partners. And that's not something that should be underestimated. It really puts us at the forefront of opportunities to scale up our operations further. And it didn't come in a day. The other thing that we definitely learned is whatever was written in the proposal on day one, when we got the grant, is not what is really happening. There's a lot of challenges that we hadn't foreseen. We had to adapt. Well, I just made an example of how do we deliver the seeds in such a way that farmers are actually willing to pay for them. We had to adapt our approaches and models. So adaptive management, another important lesson learned. And then when it comes to issues that we definitely faced, I have to say, in terms of time and micromanagement of this consortium of partners that perhaps are not used to do this every day, and perhaps are working on an operation that is slightly larger in scale than what they're used to, it's very time intensive. So it has definitely taken more than of my time and other researchers at CGIAR than we had anticipated initially. And of course, sometimes there are tensions between the willingness to act fast and do it quickly, and sort of the standards that we need in science to be able to make causal claims, for instance. And another thing, just in general, is that it's quite clear these are long-term investments, both from the private sector and from the researchers. And as usual, long-term investments can be expected to be high risk, high returns. Yeah, but you have to be willing, as a private sector, to engage into those high risks if you want to get those high returns. And that's also something that is sometimes hard to swallow for organizations that are for profit and need to back the money as fast as possible. Last slide, recommendations for the CGIAR, recommendations for the memorandum that was signed today. There is a need for flexibility, as already I was talking about. What is happening is that very often that flexibility is kept off the radar of donors because there's an expectation that donors would not understand this. So when you're investing into innovative programs, be aware that that flexibility is needed and keep that communication door open so that this can be done transparently. Second point, trust is not built in a day. It grows over time. As a matter of fact, ACRE, the insurance innovation provider, is an organization that had already worked with 4 years prior to this program. The seed companies, we clearly see the level of engagement they have now is different from before. Consider the possibility of graduation approaches, where these consortia start small and are kind of given the opportunity to grow and graduate into bigger programs later on. And then third and last point, consider that not all researchers, and by far not all private sectors stakeholders, have the managerial and facilitation capacities that are required to manage such a big program, micromanage such a big program. So, and I see that very often this is overlooked by donors, and it probably needs to be professionalized to a certain extent as well. Thank you.
Francesco, thank you so much. I'm going to invite you to, I know it's raised, I'm sure, lots of questions, lots of comments. Also, we've already moved from, with Francesco's help, from MOU into actually what does that look like in practice, with some clear recommendations. For those of you who are online, feel free, as we go through this morning, to continue to put your comments and your questions, because it's useful, even just in an exchange amongst everybody here, to hear what you all have to say. And I'm sure if there's something for Francesco, we can throw it in his direction directly if you have a question for him. But I'm now going to invite Mark on stage. Mark Schutt, who is one of the lead authors of, I hope no longer sitting on your seats, those in the room, but actually in your hands. I hope everybody has gone online to find this, the special report that we've been talking about today. Mark is a strategic advisor in innovation scaling and stage gating for the CGIAR, based in Kigali, Rwanda. So it's great to have him over here in Den Haag today. Sorry, I should have said on innovation and scaling, otherwise we don't actually know what you're special advising on. Also working with Wageningen as well, so that collaboration is there. Mark is not the only person in the room who has been one of the lead authors. Sarah Cummings is here as well, sitting over here. And we also have online Jenna Kerner, the other lead author. So all three lead authors are with us today, but also a whole range of other people who have been in part of this process, senior editors involved in the special report itself. I'm sure, Mark, you will talk about them as well. Mark, I'm going to give you 6 minutes just to give us the guide through the report. We'll be doing a deeper dive this afternoon into key elements of it.
Yeah, thank you so much, and good day, everybody. So it's my great pleasure to stand here in front of you and represent all the authors and editors that contributed to the special report. Before I start sharing some key findings, I again want to acknowledge the important contribution made by Sarah. Sarah was the lead author, and she ensured that the final product was delivered in a very inclusive and smooth way. So I just want to acknowledge that. So a little bit of framing and background. So the CGIAR 2030 Research and Innovation Strategy acknowledges that the private sector is a key partner in food system transformation, and not just in expressing demand or contributing on innovation, but also for scaling. And the CGIAR transition, of course, offers a great opportunity to further improve and harmonize strategies for working with the private sector in an impactful way. So encouraging innovation and scaling partnerships with the private sector has been strongly supported and advocated for by the Netherlands. And the Dutch have a very strong track record in developing strong public-private partnerships, both in agriculture but also in other sectors. So this special report was commissioned by the NL CGIAR Strategic Partnerships to identify, discuss and evaluate pathways for strengthening CGIAR private sector engagement. And it provides actionable recommendations on how to move this forward. So we started to develop the special report in July 2021. There was a number of initial meetings. We proposed 5 guiding questions, which I will come back to. And we had a small mini symposium with some key stakeholders involved. And then we had a process of writing, revision, iteration, also as the CGIAR dust started landing down. So it was a very interesting process up till the final version that we are launching today. And there was different groups of people collaborating and contributing to this report. So there was 3 lead authors, Sarah, Jana, and myself. There was a number of contributing authors, of which 2, Janni and Rob, are here in the room. Welcome. There was 2 senior editors, Martin Kropf and Kees Leeuwis, sitting there. And we had a couple of reviewers, mainly people who have experience both in the private sector and in the CGIAR. So understanding both worlds and giving us feedback on what you're saying here is not realistic, maybe we should reframe, etc. And on behalf of the Netherlands Food Partnership, we got great support from Marielle and Koosje in developing this report. So as many people already said, we chose a very structured approach around describing benefits, challenges and risks, principles, mechanisms, and institutional actions. So I'm not going to go into all of them, but I will highlight 4. So the first one is embrace opportunities, manage risks. So there's obviously a lot of opportunities for CGIAR and private sector to collaborate. In capacity sharing, like Juan Lucas already elaborated on, co-investment in innovation and scaling, but also joint advocacy for system transformation. But there's also risks and challenges, and we need to acknowledge them, we need to take them seriously, and we need to manage them. So the second key recommendation focuses on building on the rich CGIAR experience that is already out there. So there's in the report more than 10 case studies that describe how CGIAR and private sector partners have already worked together, and lessons learned from that. And we'll mention a few: IITA's business incubation platform, the Alliance Accelerate for Impact platform, CIMIT's public-private partnerships to strengthen maize breeding, and IFPRI's principles for private sector engagement. And it's really, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, we have to work and build on those cases and lessons learned. The third key recommendation is to empower CGIAR teams on the ground to make private sector engagement happen. So I think Kitty and Mariah also said it, like the real private sector engagement work happens on the ground. That is where CGIAR and partners work and try to achieve impact. So whilst CGIAR at the system level can promote key principles for private sector engagement, such as transparency, due diligence, etc., these principles need to be operationalized and contextualized so that we make sure that they make sense on the ground. The fourth and last key recommendation is to explore the mainstreaming of novel mechanisms of working with the private sector. Again, Juan Lucas already mentioned that there's new ways of working together: agribusiness hubs, innovation incubators, scaling accelerators, venture capital funds, etc., etc. And they provide a lot of opportunity for kickstarting or boosting CGIAR private sector engagement and collaboration. And we need to explore whether we can make better use of these kinds of safe spaces of working together. So now we have a nice report. What are we going to do with it? Next steps. So the first next step is that we need to identify how roles, responsibilities, mandates, etc., for working with private sector, how they are currently distributed across CGIAR. And there is a specific department which is called Private Partnerships for Impact that will take on this role, trying to align collaboration, etc., on private sector engagement. The second step is to develop a temporary but clearly mandated task force that will start a consultation process both within the CGIAR but also with external stakeholders, private and public, to discuss the recommendations of the report and to receive further input. And that should then translate into a strategic action plan that covers phased, funded, and planned activities for actually making it work in practice. And to try to explore how CGIAR could set up a one-stop shop for private sector engagement. So I'd like to thank you all for the attention and also welcome you to read and provide feedback to the report to the author team. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. Mark's going to be with us for the whole day. He's going to be leading one of the breakout sessions this afternoon, so he's not going anywhere. Sarah's here as well with us for the rest of the day. Jan is with us online throughout the day as well. So again, please really take your time to have a look at this. This notion of open for business is, I think is clearly one of the messages that Mark is putting across through those recommendations. But to continue down that line and actually see what some of this looks like in practice, I would like to welcome, we're going to look at this really from a private sector point of view and ask Elwin to feel that he is able, as he's sort of representing the CGIAR, to actually sort of at the same time respond to what this actually looks like. So I'm going to ask Willemien van Asselt to come on there. Come along, Elwin to come back, Maaike Hoed to come on. I think you know which order you're sitting in. I know what order you're sitting in. I think, actually, look at you, you guys have been well organized. Yes. And I think, actually, yes, Maaike's in there. They're very good. There's musical chairs up here. Oh, and I could come and sit down too. It's great for me. I get to sit down at this point as well. Let me welcome the three of you. And again, we're hoping here to really look at and to sort of unpack this idea of partnering for innovation and scale, and through your experience, but also your insights and your advice, how we can actually start to do that now and not wait 5 or 7 years. And to do that, as I said, Benjamin van Asselt, Director International of Strategy at Top Sector Agri and Food. Elwin, I've already introduced you, Managing Director Institutional Strategy and Systems at the CGIAR. And Maaike Roet, how's that? Kind of good. Manager, Public Affairs and Communication at East West Seed. Again, for this morning, it was really important to have some good private sector perspectives. We have a lot of research and policy people here in the room. We have some private sector, and we know that this is a voice that is essential if the collaboration is actually going to move forward. Maaike, starting with you. As you've been listening to the speakers, I'm sure some of this form of collaboration is resonating with you, particularly given your experience or your company's experience in collaboration. Maybe you could just give us a sense of what that looks like, because you have a great track record of working in partnership.
Thank you. Yes, just to make clear what we do, I work with a family business specialized in tropical vegetable seeds. So we develop better vegetable varieties for smallholder farmers in tropical countries. We cater to approximately 20 million smallholder farmers, most of them in Asia, but increasingly in Africa and Latin America. And we also work in a knowledge transfer foundation that trains farmers in sustainable vegetable cultivation. Because if they want to work with better seeds, quality seeds that they have to purchase, we want them to get the most benefit of those seeds. And in order to do so, we basically need partners. We cannot do it alone. We now train about 100,000 farmers every year in person. That's next to all the digital outreach that we have. But we are still like a moderately sized company, smaller NGO even. So we work with a lot of partners to do so. We work with NGOs, we work with local governments, we work with the Dutch government, and we do this for capacity building. Of course, next to that, we have our research collaboration with Wageningen, World Fetch comes in, other institutes, but it's vital for us to actually to scale. We want to step up to reaching out to 1 million farmers with our training over the coming 5 years. So in order to do so, we basically need a lot of hands and heads. So that's why partnering is crucial for scaling ambitions.
We talked a little bit earlier, so I'm going to push a little bit. We did talk a little bit earlier about, you have some great experience with World Veg. What is it about that collaboration that you think can help CGIAR elevate its collaboration with the private sector?
Well, the very obvious answer is that they do in vegetables. Of course, that's, we are working in vegetables. It's something that I would like to bring forward in this Dutch government audience as well, that vegetables are one of the things that the Netherlands are very good at. So it would be good to step up our efforts if we are trying to work on hunger. Also on nutrition, vegetables are the obvious way ahead. Vegetables are not only good for economic welfare of farmers, because it gives them more economic opportunities, but it's also the simplest way to increase nutrition with children. So in that respect, World Veg is an essential partner for us, and it's, we're still a little sad that it cannot be part of the overarching CGIAR. Of course, there's a lot of other angles in which we could collaborate also with CGIAR institutes, but the focus will always be vegetables, obviously.
Absolutely. I guess it's my sort of segue into asking Wilhelmina, a sort of similar question about those success factors for research, research organizations working in collaboration with the private sector and getting a sense of those. Maybe just as Mike has done, you could just go do just a quick introduction of when we're talking about the Dutch top sector approach. Maybe just tell us what that means, because maybe not everybody, I think maybe here in the Netherlands, you know exactly what we're talking about, but maybe globally not everybody does. So that would be great anyway. But again, what do you see as the main success factors in actually elevating, expanding, scaling that form of collaboration?
Thank you, Amanda. And I think it's a good idea to explain a bit on top sectors. I will try to keep it short. I think the approach has two ways. A big part of what we do as top sectors is public-private research and development in the Netherlands. So I think Marije Beens already mentioned that the Netherlands has a mission-driven public-private innovation agenda. And that is actually what top sectors is. This bigger part of what we do is cooperating with the private sector, with all partners in the Netherlands on these missions towards climate, circular agriculture, safe and healthy foods. But the other part is that what we try to do is to connect this to other countries based on what we do in the Netherlands. So, for example, if we work on new proteins for feed in the Netherlands, we try to connect that to countries in Africa, in South America, and try to set up public-private cooperation there. And I think that also is a part of what we aim for and what is part of the success factors, if you may, is that it's key, I think, to link to the triple helix over there as well. So we talk a lot about public-private cooperation. So what we aim for in our projects is to connect private sector research companies and, of course, government to private sector research companies and government abroad in order to have this joint public-private cooperation. I think that's one of the key.
That's super interesting. So again, talking about connecting, but connecting across different scales as well, north, south, south, north, if you like, across the whole gamut. And that does sound, again, really good advice, first of all, because that is part of what I'd like to sort of turn to you guys on, is if we're really going to do more, what do we do more of this collaboration? What do you think we need to be doing differently or potentially more of to increase its level? And we've heard from Juan Lucas about the ambition to change and increase the level of engagement. From your perspective, and I guess, Mike, I'm turning to you, I'll come back to Philomena, and then we'll get a question for Elwyn at the end. But what do you think we need to do more of or do differently?
There's a lot of things that I would like to say.
Go for it. Again, I would say this is a moment to be straight.
One of the things I think any project program should be wary of is to be careful with competing with private sector. Make sure that whatever plan is made, it doesn't bring in, for example, subsidized programs into a market economy. If, for example, an NGO starts commercial seed activities, this may very much limit the initiatives and investment of either the international seed companies or the local seed players. And by the time the subsidized program ends, there will be nothing left. And it will take a long time to recuperate for the local and also the international commercial seed businesses to step up again. So that's something that I would like to mention. Another thing that would be good to always keep a focus on is to work locally. Whatever program there is, make sure that it's supporting local communities. So even investing in local production, make sure that it also benefits the consumers. Products for export may bring in high margins, but they don't bring the benefits in terms of nutrition and food to the local population. So that's something that I would like to emphasize. And another thing that I discussed with my colleagues who are often working in partnerships is that it's sometimes hard for a private business or smaller organization to step into the whole the tender structure. So I wonder if it would be possible to have more co-creation, basically look more at the individual needs of the companies. They're not all the same. There's a big difference between the typical Dutch family business or the larger multinational company. So if you can look more at the needs of the organization that you work with, it will be easier. For example, also the time frames that are set for these programs, like try and deliver results and figures in 3 or 5 years is impossible for a private investment because it takes much longer, especially in seeds. And also the concept phase, it would be ideal if once a concept node is being approved, that is sort of a co-creation process where the CGIAR Institute or the government works with the company to try and build a program instead of just waiting for the final proposal, which will be turned down, and then everybody's time will be wasted, and we have so much other things to do.
I mean, great. First of all, just thank you. I mean, I'm just, let's be careful of local market dynamics, is what you're saying. Don't just come in blindly thinking that you're going to do good things. Local communities need to actually benefit from what is happening rather than actually being used as a sort of as an extractive mechanism. And then you talked about co-creation. So 3 really important points. But I mean, same question to you, if you can. What do we need to be doing more of or do differently?
I recognize what Mike is saying, and the list is very long, but to add to the points that Mike is mentioning. What we now are practicing is that we put the SME or the companies in the driving seat, meaning that we add research to the company questions instead of the other way around. And what I really liked about the report as well, I think what's important is that you not only express towards the companies what they can do, but also the other way around. This sounds maybe a bit logical, but if you know what you can offer and you can have the conversation with private sector about that, that makes it much more clearer. So, for example, we have a seaweed project in Chile in which we like to develop the seaweed sector in Chile with their local communities, because now they harvest this in the wild, which is not good for the ecosystems, and at the same time there are opportunities there. But then you have to teach them and know what types of seaweeds, etc. So there's an opportunity for companies and there's an opportunity for biodiversity, but then you need to know what these companies need to do that. So turn it around. I don't know if I make myself clear, but I think this is part of the interaction. If you know a bit more what private sector needs to make steps forward in this other ecosystem, and you know what you can offer, then hopefully this will work. And secondly, and we talked about that up front, I sometimes think we already do a lot of really pretty amazing things in certain countries, but sometimes it sticks within one country. So I think the exchange on, of course, countries are not the same, but exchanging between what you do in Colombia and the Delta and what you do in Vietnam and the Delta, or the types of approaches that you use, I think is quite critical, and we not do that enough. And I think there's a big opportunity for CGIAR as well to make that interconnection, to see if some things are not only scalable within the country, but maybe on a broader scale to exchange between countries ideas or business cases or whatever you call it.
Thank you very much. I mean, again, really clear. I love the way you put it, SMEs in the driving seat, and it does sort of really echo the co-creation suggestion as well, the sharing of experience and connecting, and how the CGIAR has that role it can play, which I guess, again, turning to you, Elwyn. So from what you've heard, I guess across the morning, but clearly over the last few minutes as well, what do you think a global research for development organization like the CGIAR really does need also from the private sector? You've heard a little bit of what the private sector would like to see the CGIAR doing. What do you actually need from the private sector?
I'm going to do what Kitty did earlier and not answer exactly that question, but don't worry, I will segue to that because I thought of a much better answer to your question about what's the most urgent thing we can do now. But you'll see the link in a moment. So what I would have said with a bit more time to think was, right now we are in the midst of really an escalating food price or even food system crisis, right? We've seen what's happened in Ukraine has just tipped already rather thin global markets around food prices. We've seen a surge in input prices for farmers worldwide. We've seen a surge in energy costs. There's 2 ways the global response could go to that. One could be, this could be a moment to accelerate and leapfrog into the food system transformation we've been looking for. We could see a surge of investment in renewables. We could see a surge of investment in far more efficient forms of farming, production, and consumption, because it's not just about production issues. We could see a very different approach to nutrition. We could see a change in government policies where we get into some of those issues around subsidy use and what's the best way of targeting those. And this would be north, south, east, west. This could be our moment. But it could also be a moment where we circle back into trade nationalism. We could see a burning of environmental regulations where planting takes place where it shouldn't, watersheds. We could see decisions on medium, longer term issues such as aquifer use be ignored. We could see fiscal crises because of food subsidy policies being unsustainable. And of course, we'll see a nutrition crisis. It could go either way. That's how we should be focusing our energy right now, is trying to make it the first, not the second. Now, how do I segue from this to the question you did ask? I would say that to do these things, you do need very different partnerships than the nice, comfortable ones we had in the past, where subsets of society would sit among each other and agree, whether that's specialists on certain commodities or from different markets. And I think we've all seen that. For us to do any of this, we need to be working with someone used the word awkward partnerships, which I thought was quite a nice term in a discussion I was having yesterday. With those that maybe don't see things the same way or just have a very different perspective or a very different role. And that's where our partnership with the private sector is absolutely essential. There's just no way we can transform food systems if we operate alone, and that's just a given. So that's my segue into the question. And what I'd say on that is I thought the paper did a brilliant job of just setting out the roles as vis-a-vis what we need for all this great thinking and innovation to not sit on the shelf. And that's partnerships with the private sector, who are the vast majority of the activity that takes place on the ground. And that's not just global corporate private sector, it's local farming groups, it's supermarket chains, it's a huge range of this amorphous term private sector. We need their engagement and support on articulating demand, what's needed, what products are requested, because we can't ascertain all of that, nor should we by ourselves. We need them as an innovation partner. There are so many wonderful ideas bubbling, surfacing, coming about there. We need them as a scaling partner, particularly because that's our pathway to impact. And the rigor through which, certainly in CGIAR in the last few years, we've been scrutinizing all our proposals around, well, is this impact pathway real? Can you actually, do we have confidence in that? How do we even test the impact pathway? All this great work Mark and colleagues have been doing on readiness for scaling, all that is now in our project cycle. We certainly need help as fundraising partner. Agricultural or food systems research is not always easy to fund, and the private sector is an obvious partner there. And that's not necessarily traditional funding, although of course that would be welcome, but it's also the work around startup accelerators and incubators, very much more innovative, early risk-taking funding. And then, of course, capacity sharing. There's huge pools of capacity in the global, local, private sector, and we need far more exchange. It's not just technical capacity, it's also ways of thinking and ways of seeing the world. So, I think this notion of open for business is a really strong one. When Lucas set it out, the one CGIAR model is really about being a far more open model, far more easy to access for our partners than that rather confused model of where it was just quite hard for people to know where to go. So, yeah, that's how we see things.
Thanks a lot, Elwyn. And I think on that note, because I think we've got that whole sense of, as Elwyn said, this is a moment, this is globally a moment right now. And so being able to really elevate and implement those partnerships, now is the time to actually make that work. Mike, you've given us some really good guidance about what that could look like, how that could happen. Benjamin, you've done the same, and you've both brought to light through your own private sector experience. Thank you very much. I think a round of applause at this point. Do you want to descend from our nice stage? That would be very good. And I'm at the same time going to ask Martin, is he here somewhere? There he is, to come up. Good morning, Martin. I haven't actually said good morning to you yet. Martin, please do come up and join me up here. It's definitely a lot of comings and going around here. For those that don't know, Martin Kropf, who's the Global Director for Resilient Agri-Food Systems at the CGIAR. Martin has the nice job of closing this morning's session. And then just give me 1 minute at the end just to tell people what's happening this afternoon. Yep.
Good. Thank you. It's so great to have a meeting like this. And in the Netherlands, CGIAR and the Netherlands, strong collaboration for a long term. And I'm very proud on this report. Congratulations to the authors. Kees and I had the honor to be senior editor, but the work has been done by the authors, of course. And it's so valuable. It's exactly in the heart, and the timing is super. Now, you heard this morning what's all going on in the CGIAR. There's many stories going around, but the one thing that is really happening is the initiatives. They are now being launched and on the ground. So the science is going on, and especially the science for impact. Now, this morning we heard about the major challenges in the global South. Don't have to repeat anything, but also the role of the private sector and the complexity, and especially the panel that we just had as well. I think there are many sensitivities, but also many opportunities, and when we use all our brains together, we can do something. I've been involved, of course, in Wageningen and in the top sector of the Agri-Food, and also in the CGIAR now for 7 years. We mimicked the top sector approach also in Mexico, and in other parts of the world, but we can learn so much more from the Netherlands, and we will take it on. And it's great, Juan Lucas, also that we start now also to organize ourselves, not that everybody is doing something, but that we're getting organized in our partnerships. Now, the key messages this morning, very important: need action, and really need action, and that's why we have the initiatives, and they are now going on. Show examples, and we saw now a few examples here, but there are many more, and we have to make sure, Mark, that we get an inventory, that people can get excited about all the examples that we have. Scaling with the private sector. What Kitty said this morning, from PPP to 3S, triple S, I think it is PPP and triple S. But maybe I will discuss it later with Kitty, because the systems thinking, science for impact and scaling are super important, but also through public-private partnerships. And it's not as simple as in the Netherlands, that there is a government really supporting them in the global south, so we have to find mechanisms to get that going. But the science is going on in 3 global science groups. I'm leading one of them, the Resilient Agri-Food Systems. And the good thing is that we have initiatives there, but also regionally integrated initiatives, where we are really on the ground, demand-driven, and really go for scaling in all the 6 regions in the global south in the world. So I can hope that we can apply the knowledge and the experience that we have here in those different regions. So the Netherlands is having a leadership in the funding in the System Council. Very important, and thanks for that, Wijnand. But also the contribution with the white paper is really what we need. Now, the 3 recommendations, Mark already told them, I won't repeat them. But we have detailed recommendations in there. And last night I read it again, and it's extremely valuable. So we shouldn't just have the high-level recommendations. By the way, who has read the report? Not enough. Not enough. No, it's really valuable. So for everybody who is interested and they are here, please have a look at it and add to this, because we want to learn. We want to keep being a learning organization. So this afternoon we will discuss some critical aspects. And I really would like to invite all of you. I don't know if people online can also join. Please do so. Amanda knows perfectly how to have breakout sessions in those rooms, right? We had many of those with you. But first is basically how to develop an organizational mechanism for PPPs. And of course, helping Juan Lucas and his team. Because it's not that simple in an organization working in 100 countries, building up also an organizational structure, but we need to learn from the teams here, because in several organizations we have done this. Second one is sharing lessons learned. Because, like, for example, Maaike just indicated, I had also those discussions. Are we not competing with the NARS or with the private sector? Of course we should not. But we need the private sector to do the scaling. So we have to find the mechanisms. Where is it becoming competition? And where is it becoming support and scaling? And the third one is CGIAR's assets and place in the agricultural technology innovation system. That's more also theoretical, because we are a science organization, but science for impact, we go further than we go in Wageningen, because we really are being evaluated on the impact that we have through our partners. So it's a bit more complicated in that sense. So also people are interested and experienced in that area, join those sessions. And of course, Amanda will explain where we will have the sessions, but the overall mission, and that's why we are here, is basically that we together have to see how research can help to transform our agri-food systems for more affordable, sufficient, and healthy diets produced within planetary boundaries. And thank you all for helping us. I'm proud that the Netherlands is so supporting the CGIAR for the coming 6 years, and we'll make sure with the team that's here also that we will bring that message also to our colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. Thanks. So, just to be clear, I think our live stream is it still open? Our live stream is still open. That's good to know. Our live stream is going to close in just a moment. This afternoon, we will be moving everybody, including those, please do stay with us after lunch, into a purely virtual space, but we've set it up for those who are physically here in Den Haag to be able to participate in that in the theatre here as well. On the live stream right now, you should be getting your Zoom link for this afternoon. Excellent. And we will be moving into that Zoom space. I'll open in plenary in Zoom, and then we'll go into those 3 different groups that Martin's just explained. I guess just to finish the morning, though, thank you, huge thank you to all the speakers, to all the participants. It's been a great and really rich morning, and we actually have an MOU signed. It was in my hands a while ago, which is also really exciting. So a big round of applause for everybody for participating this morning.